life is life is full of shit, dumpster fires, and pain, and you know, but there is an invitation on the flip side of that, to participate as an active participant in the flowering bloom of the universe, and it's something that our souls need, and if I can inspire people towards that in any possible way in my work, whether it's $100 million yacht or it's just a picture on my Instagram or something in between, then that's a good day.
David, welcome.
Yes,
It's a
thank you.
pleasure to have you. David, tell us where you are and what you do.
I am in drizzly Raleigh, North Carolina, at the moment. And when you hear what I do, it might be a little bit of a surprise, being somewhat landlocked, but I design boats. For a long time, I said I design silly boats for silly people, but I count myself among the silly people. So,
Silly people with a lot of money to spend, it seems to me.
yeah, yeah. Money kind of is an important piece of any puzzle, any puzzle, especially a puzzle involving boats. So yeah, but the beauty of the modern world is I'm able to sort of work in New York, Miami, London, LA, and sort of X marks the spot right here. I don't have to deal with any of the BS of actually living in any of those places. And I have nonstop flights to all of them every day of the week, so I can show up at your doorstep anytime I need to. And meanwhile, uh, live a pretty sane life on this particular corner of the planet.
Well,
So
I saw that you went to NC State, and I can tell from the sound of your long O's that you might be a North Carolina native.
I'm close. I'm close. I was actually born in Williamsburg in Virginia.
Okay.
And I did a stint out in the Midwest. I was in Oklahoma for sort of preschool to high school, and then back this to the Beast Coast for the last while. And I've definitely been I say y'all a lot more than I used to.
Whenever we were in grad school, I'm from South Carolina. So when we were in grad,
Just went to Charleston. We were in Charleston last week. How?
I suspect you've got a lot of reasons to be in Charleston. There's probably plenty of people wanting to
Yeah.
buy a
Oh yeah,
super duper fancy boat in Charleston.
very much so.
But so we were in grad school together with these northerners, and I'd go home to visit for Christmas, whatever, and I'd come back and they'd all make fun of me and say I recharged my batteries because my accent would be so heavily, heavily skewed away from the neutral Ohio.
Milk
Um,
Yeah,
toast.
yeah,
yeah.
but well, that's a little bit of so what had you in Oklahoma? Is your family military or something like that, or just
No, my part of my family was at the Air Force Base out there, but my immediate family just moved out there because my dad's extended family was out there, and so um, chance at a inflection point came along when I was 3 or 4, and we went and moved out there, and it's flat, there's no trees, but the people are great.
yeah.
So I loved spending time out there, but it was a whole new chapter doing high school back on the East Coast and sort of meeting different kinds of thinkers, and you know I found that there's a lot more. One of my axioms that I live by is not accepting the world as it's presented to you, and I think that to some extent had some of its roots in some of the new kinds of conversations and new kinds of thinkers that I met when we moved back out east.
I already kind of get a little bit of a sense about you that you got kind of a way of serendipitously winding your way into something a little different in life. My first initial question to you from hearing some of your story is like, how do you get to yacht designer? Like when you decide to be a graphic designer, your family kind of mourns a little bit, and they're like, "Oh, well, you're going to be poor for your rest of your life, so I guess we can't.
Yeah,
We're
those are the
going to
people
push
that like
retirement out a little bit."
make CD covers
Yeah.
or something.
Right. So I imagine, depending on your upbringing and the structure around you and your family life, people say, "Oh, you're going to design boats, huh?" Like, "Oh, well, that's I didn't see a whole lot of listings for that job in the classifieds this week."
No, no, it's definitely as serendipitous and serpentine uh as far as the path goes. I, as you may be able to tell, more than a little bit have more than a little bit of a car problem. I'm a car guy through and through, and was looking significantly at the sort of art center is obviously a leading contender as far as states options go for studying that sort of thing. And then you have Pforzheim in Germany and Coventry in the UK. There's just a pretty uh, elite set of schools that sort of pull the strings in the world of car design. And I was sort of had my application and was headed out to Pasadena to Art Center. And I found out right, in the perfect moment, that even though I was 18 and headed off to college, mom and dad said, "You're going to be a big brother again."
Hmm.
I said, "No way." And and I thought about that for a while. I thought, I don't want to come home once every 6 months and have him going, "Who the hell are you?" So I decided to look a little closer to home, and as far as my studies go, and ended up uh, realizing what a pedigreed program the design school at NC State was, and had such sort of legends that had come through the faculty and so on. I think it was #1 public design school in the state or in the country at the time. It may still be, I don't know, but it looked like a good landing zone, and ended up pivoting towards that. But I kind of knew that I was placing myself outside of the realm of car design, at least as far as the sweet spot goes. And so but that didn't deter me from continuing to hammer away in that particular corner during my studies. And it was right before I graduated. I think it was a week before I graduated. I was in the studio on campus. We had these great open studios. People would sit on their desks and lock their bikes to the drafting tables, and it was a great environment there. But I think I may have even been sitting on my desk, and I had this guy walk by, and he was looking at my stuff, and he said, "I like your sketches. You should design for me." I said, "Okay. What do you design?" And he said, "Custom super yachts." And I kind of obviously was not expecting that. And to to some extent, I think I had a little bit of a negative reaction to that, because my awareness of that world was it was fairly stuffy and somewhat boring, kind of stuck in the 80s sort of space. But the second thought was, well, this is a transportation design space, and maybe if it is boring, maybe I can shake it up. And that book right there, one of the leading operators in the media of the boat design, yacht design world, called me one of the leading and most influential disruptors in the industry. So I guess I got there. But the that's Boat International. But I got dropped in the deep end, and ironically, yeah, little did I know at that moment, I thought, well, I'll give it a try, see how I like this. and that was 18 years ago. So I guess I'm still giving it a try. Uh,
How long you think it'll take you to figure out if you like it?
Give me another 5 or 10,
Okay.
we'll see.
We'll check back in with you for another call.
Yeah, yeah,
Get
yeah.
the
Just
verdict.
set an alarm for about half a decade from now. But I have maintained interests outside of that, and I've been able to do some stuff. I worked with a friend of mine, David Levy, on a project for some film design. We worked on a dystopian road trip meets Mad Max movie with Tom Hanks, produced by Spielberg, and got to do stuff with designing some of the vehicles for that, a little bit of input on some of the robots. David did most of the robot stuff, and then I've actually gotten to do a little bit of car design consultation, worked with Weissman, and did some other fun stuff there. So I've maintained some variety there, but I kind of fell headfirst into boats right off the bat, right after graduation. But I didn't stay with that firm for very long. It was a real fast turn on that. Ironically, serendipitously, the lead designer at that firm that I was sort of in a trial run with uh, left during the week I was there, and the owner of the firm didn't realize he was headed out. And at the end of the week, the guy said, I can't keep you on. I've just lost, my main designer. I need to deal with that. Call me in 6 weeks or 6 months or something. But it was enough, I'd seen behind the curtain. I thought, there's more here than I realized, And so despite only, I was literally there just a week, and had to sort of hack my way through from being sort of in that moment for a moment on the front line to sort of starting, to sort of break into the space despite having already gotten to dip my toe in the water. So it was an interesting journey. And little footnote to that journey, my little brother, who uh, I did end up becoming really close with, actually ended up going to the same design school I went to, except he went for graphic design. So he
Ah,
just he just
poor guy.
graduated. Yeah, I pushed him to do industrial design like I did, and he's a graphic design nerd like crazy. He's a polymath though. He's a unicorn. He's having a lot of fun doing a lot of different stuff. But his first love is really kerning.
Wow. Well, I'm feel terrible for this person that they take pleasure in that, but that'll maybe it's a phase. Who
Yeah,
knows? Give it
that'll,
time.
I don't know. It might wane a little bit, my experience anyways.
Yeah, well, I think that's the beauty of the space. I kind of felt like when I did industrial design, it was more I was kind of because I had options of architecture, graphic design, art and design, landscape architecture, um, and we were sort of the black sheep of the school a little bit because we didn't conform to any particular space. We sort of have ended up sort of dubbing myself an arsonist of creativity, just sort of setting creative fires wherever I can, wherever people allow me. Sometimes pouring a little gasoline on stuff if need be, and moving on to the next. And oh, this one's fizzling a little bit. You're a little more, flamethrower over here. But to me, part of what I love about what I do is its lack of convention and lack of neat and tidy little boxes. So it's definitely something that um, I lean into the variety. I mean, you can tell minimalism is not my strong suit.
I'm going to talk about something I'm not qualified for. So anybody who knows what they're talking about with this, I'm butchering it, but I've
I'll leave
read
it in the comments.
what's
So,
yeah, exactly. Please do. My goodness, if I'm wrong,
Yeah, increase
please.
our engagement.
Yeah. Um, so I've read a bit of Carl Jung in my adult life, and one of the tenets of Jung's philosophy is that there's a correlation between the human psyche and the human home.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that connection's a little bit beyond me to really illustrate, but he lays it out like in dream analysis that when you're in a structure in your dream, that structure represents your psyche, and as you explore it or find things or whatever, that's what's happening. And I think there's also a correlation between how we create that space around us physically and as a reflection of our psyche. And I think your psyche's got a lot going on in it.
I would plead guilty to that. I believe. I've joked when people come into my studio here, just welcome them to the inside of my brain because it's not terribly far off base there. My wife calls this the toy store. So
Huh. Yeah, definitely. Looks like a really nice, like well curated antique store.
yeah, I just I'm a design oriented hoarder.
Well,
So I like and I curate that across the board. I'm somebody who I'm always looking for that fuel and that brain food and that inspiration spark. And so I one of the one of the things that served me best in my trajectory has been to constantly be I've built in a knee-jerk reaction to capture anything I can, however I can, that has sort of a spark of like I have a folder in my on my Instagram of things that I save. And the folder title is Fresh Needed. And sort of and it's got thousands and thousands of images, and it's all kinds of weird stuff from an octopus that you've never seen before to a 1930s film set to some concept sketch that someone's done. And in this modern fast-paced world of especially as a professional creative needing to have creativity quote unquote on demand, you've got to have sort of a backlog of fuel that you can go for, that you can sort of have a quick draw on being able to grab something to fire you up in a particular direction. And so that's something that I always try and lean into as much as I can because it's and both literally with my physical world and the Jungian environment, but also in my digital environment as well. With there's a setting you can have on Apple computers where you have a new image come up on your background every 10 seconds or 30 seconds or 2 minutes. And I think I have mine set for every 10 seconds or so. And I've got this repository that I'm always refreshing. And that stuff's coming up in front of me all the time. So
very,
it's something that, yeah, welcome to my brain is not an exaggeration. I have probably overdosed on inspiration a little bit, but I like it.
it's an easy thing to do. I think, as design educators, one of the things that we learned is that some things creativity is this big word that doesn't
Yeah.
have a really concrete definition, and as in any professional application, it's made up of lots of different stuff. And so some parts of that design education are technical, and that's relatively easy to teach somebody. You just practice the thing over and over again and your skill will be refined.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are other sides to it too, philosophical, academic, but the thing that's hardest to teach people and maybe even impossible to a certain extent is taste. And it's something that I always struggled with. I mostly taught underclassmen. And so I was like that terrifying foundations professor that, everybody hated. And one of the things that I tried to inject into that was that to ask these questions of why. Why did you do that? And of course, an 18-year-old kid has no clue why they do anything. But in particular, when you're building your visual dialect as a designer, you're learning visual languages. You're also learning what your personal tastes are, what you like and dislike, but you got to go farther than that. You got to understand what works and what doesn't, why, who it may
Yeah.
appeal to, why it would work for them and not for them. And
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
that comes together in a practical application. And that's only the individual really can do that.
Yeah.
And as designers or we'll open it up to generally creative people, maybe that
Yeah.
you have that internal response to
Yeah. Yeah.
things, but knowing why you do or being able to catalog it and make use of it is really
Yeah.
difficult. So for you, you've got like some sort of neurological function that allows you to like have a Rolodex in your brain to touch upon all of those things, which is I'm sure helps you out a lot when you're designing a yacht.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's something um, as you say, you've got to curate, you've got to build, you've got to, build some reps in, put some reps in, and people oftentimes when they hear I'm a designer, one of the first responses, I can't even draw a straight line or a stick figure. And I always say neither could I until I practiced. There's that taste that you have that you have some sort of you often have some sort of vision or desire to see something created or built or achieved. But I don't know if I'm sure you have, but there's a great talk by Ira Glass called The Gap. And he talks about the gap between your taste and your capabilities. He talks about it more from the perspective of being a writer, but I think it applies across the board to any level of creativity. What you've got to realize is that your taste is sort of a North Star, and you'll never get there if you don't put in time and put in the reps and be willing to try stuff and get out there and fail. You know.
Well, it's a bit of like the language component or the dialect, depending on how you want to use the metaphor. It's like if you if there's a whole alphabet of of a visual language out there, and you only educate yourself on like 6 letters, then you're not going to be able to, you put a few words together, but it's not going to be particularly profound. But if you can learn that whole alphabet, beat the dead horse of this metaphor, then you've got a lot of flexibility. And then, as anybody that has a design background knows, like you could write the letter a lot of different ways, and so even within each of those components, you've got sort of this uh, infinite amount of possibility and variation that you can play with. But if you never explore it, if you never learn that language, then you're going to be pretty stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's that sort of level of discipline is undervalued and underestimated largely today in this sort of instant gratification. Snap your fingers and you've got Netflix and Papa John's, and there's the comfort. I'm a big fan of being comfortable, but at the same time, the quote, "Your comfort zone will kill you," is equally true. And so I I don't try to question everything, but um I try and look at what potential might be out there in any capacity that I can in the world. And um, if there's a better solution or something that can be done to solve the inanity of humanity, that that's something that I've got a fire in the belly for, and for whatever reason. And but that does require commitment and getting in the trenches. I don't do it as often as I used to, but I still you know crank out all-nighters and get shit done in extreme measures where necessary, because it's just that's part of the journey. And I think there's something in culture that sort of says that you're either you're a creative or you're not. And I'm a strong believer that there's creativity in all of us. And, it might be super repressed, but the story of the kids, that are in preschool, and they ask how many artists are in the room, and every hand goes up. And then, middle school, half the hands go up, and high school, one or two, shaking hands come up, and sort of that confidence in building things and creating things and exploring and discovering is sort of beaten out of us to some extent. You've got to have some commitment to the crazy in order to carry forward any momentum in what you do, and not be afraid of failing or falling, because the immense possibilities that are before us every single day mean that you can fail 100 times on a given day and still come out a winner if you have that commitment.
Yeah, with I'm glad you mentioned the failure component, because I think that's what people start to shy away from as they progress through the educational system and into adulthood, is you get more and more and more risk averse. So my question for you then is, how do you feel that you've been able to maintain that? How do you maintain that perseverance in the face of, what has to be lots and lots of failures, because that is the creative process in one sense of the word.
Um, it's it's something you do have to learn. It even today, if I break out a pencil and say, okay, I'm going to go start designing something, I I can get all excited about an idea I have, and then I put pencil to paper, and the stuff that comes out is crap. And there's, any machine, especially high performance vehicles and stuff like that, uh, all of the manufacturers will tell you it needs to warm up a little bit before you really push it. If you fire up your Porsche 911 GT3 RS and you just go balls to the wall with it immediately, chances are it's not going to perform, and you're going to break something, or both.
Crack the
And
engine block.
exactly, which I threw a rod through a Porsche engine block at one point, so I know a thing or two about that. But um, the I still have to remind myself when I put the pencil to paper and what comes out is less than a tenth of what I would had in here, that just sort of take I'm not a big believer in just throwing out failures. I think sitting with the first thing that came out and see if there's anything there. Because if you just say that's crap, I'm throwing that out onto the next, you then have to build from scratch over and over and over again. So it takes more energy and sometimes more time to be conscious of the fact that there may be an element of value in the first thing that comes out, even if the macro is not something that you can carry forward. And so part of the way that I have built some resilience and some ability to keep pushing forward is to take the nuggets of the good in the bad, and sort of pull those out and carry those as fuel forward, rather than this sort of black and white thinking um, that tends to permeate a lot of conversations around this. I think as creatives, we tend to live more in the gray zone, and that's great. I left a company at one point, on my last day, I wore all gray, because I knew I was the only person in that team that was really willing to live in the in between, rather than the binary of either this or that. And so again, coming back to discomfort, being willing to see and look for and discover and capture the good in that tension between the start and the finish line.
Well, that goes back to where this portion of our conversation really started, with that idea of understanding taste, which taste is knowing if something's good or bad. And
Yep.
then you ask yourself, why is it good or bad? And at that beginning stick figure level, you can
Right.
look at it and say, why is this bad? Well, the circle's oblong. Okay, so what's how I practice the muscle movement, whatever, I'll go get a stencil. Like, there you see what's wrong, and then you understand why it should be better. And the reason that's so important is because your taste for whether it's good or bad is not the determining factor of its success. The functionality it has out in the universe is the determining factor of its success. And what you've got there in front of you it's totally irrelevant whether you like it or not. What's
Yeah.
relevant is, does it work or not? Why not? And then step by step going there. Sometimes you're going to throw that out, but usually at bare minimum, you have an understanding of functionality that is addressed in the following iterations.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. And that's yeah. And yeah, it does take, as I said, more. It takes a little bit more out of you. It takes to stay engaged instead of just flipping the light switch on or off, and sort of staying that in between does require more energy and willingness to consider possibilities, and that takes something different as far as an approach goes. But one of my favorite quotes that I probably quote, I don't know, almost daily is "When in doubt, zoom out."
Hmm.
And that's Reggie Watts, and it's so relevant across so many situations in life and work and creativity. That moment where you step away to sort of see the big picture or get a different picture entirely before you come back to what you were doing. It never stops having an incredible amount of power to unveil and take the blinders off you for things that could have been in front of you the whole time and you'd never see it without that zoom out.
Well, I think that's something of a segue to like what I want to talk about, which is what it's like to design a yacht, because I mean, it's so complex. Like I have yielded having read a little bit about Bauhaus and that sort of thing whenever I was getting my education. I personally yielded my ego a long time ago to think like architecture being the highest form of design, because ultimately all design is a relationship between empty space and positive form. And in communication, that relationship's just got to convey relatively simple information. But in architecture, it's totally defines the entire living experience. It can be literally be life or death. It can be, millions of dollars. And you are like an architect, except your shit's got to float. And that's, like
Not just
you
float, and also it can't just be a canoe and sit there. It's got to go somewhere
Yeah, and it's got to come back, which is probably the
and then come back. Yeah,
and
precisely.
And so your work's heavily stylized, at least the work that you put on social. I don't know if those are just musings or if that's, actual functional stuff, but
As with anything, it's a combination, but yeah.
right. And so there's that heavy application of style, but usually for most people who are professional creatives, they have to throttle style quite a lot. It's typically very rare in a creative career that you're able to have a strong style, because that means your style sought after. There's value in your style. But
Right.
even with what you do, it's even more complex because there's physics involved, and your style has to conform to like the laws of material matter.
Yep.
And so like that's, I don't know, it's just mind-boggling to me that you can touch it. Like you talked about zooming out. That's what got me there.
Yeah.
Is that, man, you must have to zoom way out.
Yeah. Yeah. I do, and it's something that I've learned to love. But it's, as you say, with doing boats and yachts and so on. By the very nature of it, it's you're going up against the other 70% of the Earth's surface, and you need to not lose. because it's literally life or death in many instances. And so, and it's also something that, for better or worse, humanity's been building boats a lot longer than cars or airplanes or anything like that. So there's a massive legacy of knowledge, but also there's a lot of vestigial momentum as far as the style and expected forms and layouts and even ultimate use cases and so on. And so pushing against that, those conventions, it will leave you bruised and bloodied, as you can imagine. But one of the best ways to successfully bring new ideas and new design and new forms and function to the space is to do a significant amount of homework on how things actually work and what there is precedent for, what there is, proven technologies and platforms and naval architectures and material science and so on and so forth. And I've got a pretty long-running verified nerd card that that has served me well in that department. Actually, getting into the trenches and understanding the technology and the physics and so on and so forth, not to the exclusion of blue sky dreaming creativity, but I find that my blue sky dreaming creativity, I can defend it and protect it a lot better if I'm able to say to the detractors. I mean, earlier you mentioned something about, friends and family taking your chosen line of work seriously. I had plenty of people asking me if I ever considered just getting a normal job. One person asked me if I ever considered getting a real job. And so, that's friends and family. And then you get people in the space that have been, at this task of building vessels and imagining the future of watercraft for decades, as long as I've been alive, and to bring them fresh ideas and so on is an undertaking as well. So I kind of undergird my process as much as I can with digging into the real capabilities and real limitations and capabilities that are out there, but also staying abreast of nascent technologies and things that are hitting other sectors and other industries. I find it to be tremendously helpful to the world of boats and yachts, for better or worse, tends to be a bit myopic, and so bringing pieces of other verticals to the space that are already sort of pre-vetted by either the worlds of aviation or automotive or architecture and beyond, is a great way to sort of get early traction in this space. But on the flip side, I've got to stay inspired and stay, the thing that brought me to the space was not, the nerdy tech and the engineering know-how. The thing that brought me to the space was my passion for humanity and beauty and creativity and sculpting something from nothing. And so I really enjoy, you can see a little behind me here, I'm a huge fan of movies and sci-fi and production design and people that spend tens of millions of dollars sculpting stories and worlds that the population of the planet pays, by the head to go see and experience and immerse themselves in. And so I've actually had a huge amount of inspiration from, the silver screen and beyond, and sort of bring those two components together and try and catch whatever shrapnel comes out of those collisions. That's been my sort of process. And the part of the way I do that is people. I find that it doesn't matter whether you're flipping boats or flipping burgers, people that you're dealing with will make or break anything. And so hence my philosophy of finding the good ones. But the thing that has fueled a lot of that is finding those partners and finding those co-conspirators. I'm a huge believer in meeting your heroes and getting out there. I mean, there's people, there's designers who I used to steal their books off of my fellow design students' studio desks that are now people that I call friends and colleagues, and that sort of thing also bolsters that, the wave of, stagnation and people that don't want to change anything. I sat in a speech about the state of yacht design in the world, and new regulations that were coming in Monte Carlo some years ago. And several of the speakers spent 10, 20, 30 minutes talking about how do we keep doing things the way we have been doing things despite these new regulations that are coming in, that are meant to bring more human aspects to yacht design, to make it more human friendly, and especially for the crew and so on. And I stood up and said, everybody's talking about how do we just keep doing things the way we have been despite this change. And I say this is an opportunity to discover something new, to try something different, to look at this from a new angle. And I was the only speaker that day that got a standing ovation. So that's not to toot my own horn, but that's what I'm here for.
A man who goes about setting things on fire will not be embraced by everyone. And
No.
that's so much of our conversation today has touched upon like the inner worlds and the outer worlds. And this is like my philosophy of life, or my worldview, is that we have an experience of life that we see as one thing, but the truth is there's a duality to our material experience. But because of our sluggish biological evolution, it wasn't necessary for us to understand this duality until we've got fairly complex in our consciousness.
Yeah.
And that duality has been called a lot of things: yin, yang, masculine, feminine, order, chaos.
Yeah.
And the truth is that they are impossibly at the same time two things and one thing. We can't suss it out in our limited human brains. And it truly defines everything. It defines the idea of a boat, which is this sort of beautiful, sleek artifact out there, but the what makes it work is what's on the inside of it, and some of the things that you touched upon, and its functionality in a human sense, not its purely aesthetic or performance. And but also when we talk about things like your the psyche and the environment that you put yourself in, but you just
Yeah.
touched upon one of those, the another paradigm of it, and sort of proving the fact that it's everywhere, is that when you're a person who, for whatever reason, you're able to see greatness, you're able to see the past and the future connecting, you're able to see this vein of power that runs through history and society and individuals. You have to go touch it, and you have to go put yourself into it. You've got to do it. You don't have a choice
Well
but
said.
to refine yourself, to get better. It's like, I know that, having a little taste of that as a writer, that a lot of times I think, well, life's half over at this point. How far have I gotten? Have I made a worthy contribution?
Yeah.
Have I done something that anybody's going to look at when I'm dead?
Well,
And you can't you can't have that mindset and make everybody happy. You're not,
yeah.
because you are going to have to you are going to have to tear some things down, and rightfully so. That's what life is. Life is it's the decay of what's no longer useful and the birth of what will take its place. And
Yeah.
so I would say that the what's practical in my philosophical wandering there is for anybody that's listening, particularly a younger person. If you've seen any of our other episodes at this point, not knowing what order anything is in, but that conversation has arisen with like Olympic athletes. It's arisen with artists. It's there's something about that in life that's universal, that when you know discover that you've got a strength or a power or an insight, you have a obligation to yourself and maybe to the world to do something with it. And
Yeah.
don't worry about what people say. Do it. You got to
Yeah.
do it.
I love that. I love that. And I'm a, you know, notorious for sort of pushing people on that and saying, what is it? What is it that what gets you out of bed in the morning when you didn't sleep that well, but there's something out there that's really got you and pulling you in, and you're raising Detra, the thing for the fire within. And that's tough for a lot of people. I tend, as I've said, I tend to sort of overdose on that a little bit. But if my overdosing on that can wake some other people up, then more's the better. I I think there is a transcendent, that's beyond, something that's in the eye of the beholder, that we're all drawn towards, true beauty, and something that is primal deep within us, that has value beyond, the transience of time. And I try and pursue that every day, and it's awesome when I'm able to contribute something of that through my work to the world. But at the same time, it's awesome to see the beauty of that sort of beauty. The amazing part about that sort of beauty is you don't really need to have a sense of ownership over it. It's just, if whether it's something that you built or it's something that naturally occurred in a sunset or something like that. It's just, I can celebrate it almost as an observer, even though it may have been something that I helped bring to be. I was in an airport lounge not too long ago, and they had these huge 30-foot tall windows, and it was right at sunset, and they had the shades drawn over the windows because the sun was just blasting in, and the sun got low enough to where you could lift the blinds. And so these huge 100-foot wide, 30-foot tall blinds sort of lifted in this giant room. And it was like all of the people, there were hundreds, maybe at least dozens of people that just sort of got up, stopped what they were doing, and went to the window for the sunset. And people had their phones out. People were just, on their phones talking about what they were looking at, and people just sort of sitting there soaking it in. And that's the thing that I want to serve, is getting to that moment, of something that's beyond, and something that encourages us further in and further up.
It's so interesting you told that story, because I have like a very similar story where I had an epiphany
Yeah.
just like that. One day when we were in grad school, I had to cross campus, and it was one of those days with a sunset where it's just, the full color palette of, God's color palette in the sky, and weird clouds and everything. And as I
Exactly.
walked across campus, I kept seeing people stopping, taking pictures with their phone. And it just if something clicked in me, I was like, this experience is so universal and so powerful that all of these people they are compelled to stop what they're doing and try to capture it. And they're not going to.
No,
Their
but
phone,
there's a desire to touch it, or own it, or enter into it in some way.
to
There's
touch
a
the magic.
Yeah, there's a magnetism or a gravity beyond this world, in that it's like a hint of the beyond in some way. And I to get to play in that liminal space between worlds is fantastic.
Well, it's I think the power of that realization though is that there, like 2 million years ago, some primitive creature looked out from a cave or whatever and saw a sunset, and consciousness had finally evolved to a point where they were felt an emotional response to it.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the legacy of the artist, that's the legacy of the creative, the poet. I mean, the what's powerful about the message for somebody listening is that you are part of that.
Yes,
You
absolutely.
that vein of profound, unfathomable beauty,
Yes.
immortal, eternal, infinite beauty is a
Yeah.
part of you. You are connected to it. You can contribute to it. You can
Yeah.
take away from it. If you're just if you're open, you can get something from it. If you're dedicated, you can develop a skill and contribute to it. And if you're fucking crazy, then you can put a tiny microscopic little stamp somewhere on it and say that was the part that I did, but it takes that's mastery. That takes a lifetime of pursuit to do that. But that's what the crazy people are all going for.
And that's what I want everyone to realize is, life is full of shit, dumpster fires and pain. And you know, but there is an invitation on the flip side of that, to participate as an active participant in the flowering bloom of the universe. And it's something that our souls need. And if I can inspire people towards that in any possible way in my work, whether it's $100 million yacht or it's just a picture on my Instagram or something in between, then that's a good day.
It's important for people, I think, to understand that, like, we're professionals in a creative field, and we do have experience training, external motivations that allow us to participate in this in a very direct way and get money from it. But that's not a requirement at all. Like, for example, my colleague here who's been doing martial arts for 25 years, he's a very, very high artist in his form. He has an understanding of it that I'll never understand. If I started today, I'd never catch up with him. And his he's able to he is able to touch upon that great profound beauty in the movement of the human body and the detachment of the mind from the experience that he's having, right? And ultimately, for the end result being to maim and kill. But that's a part of life too.
That's
That
part of
and,
life too.
and it's
Yep.
and it's valid and it's necessary.
Yep.
It is necessary.
Yep.
And he's probably never going to make a damn dime off of it. In fact, it's probably going to cost him more money than anything to be that artist.
Yeah, so far a net negative as far as the financial compensation part, but you know,
But that's to me, to some extent, I was sitting on a boat somewhere in the world with a couple that I just met, and the wife said something really profound. And I don't think it's original to her, but it's something that uh is relevant regardless, that is what you're doing something you would do, at least part of what you're doing with your life, something that's part of what you would do if you had all the money in the world and never had to worry about a roof over your head or an amazing meal again in your life. Would you still go do that thing? And to some extent, despite this being my chosen career, that's where I am blessed enough to sit. And um but I also, I've done a little bit with movies, but I consume movies and film and stories and characters like a maniac. Nobody's paying me to do that, you know. And so I love when I run into anybody that sort of is crazy about a particular thing, whatever it is, anything a little bit crazy. That's you got a little bit of mania in you to go hunt down and find and try and conquer and achieve and discover and perfect is part of the essence of what we're here for. And I think, you know, psychology and physiology and, you know, the medical world, in my understanding, bear that up. As you know, people that do lean into that stuff are more mentally and emotionally balanced. They're more physically in a good place. So it's not just to scratch an itch for something you want or you're passionate about. It's all of the world around you, sort of down to the molecules in your own body, seem to affirm this, you know, to some extent. And I love that. I just thinking about the forms and the movement in martial arts space, and you know, it's funny how all of these things connect. One of my favorite designers, Peter Stevens, who did the McLaren F1, which is my favorite car of all time, and I've got magazines and models of the car and all that. It's this orange one right here. I love that car, but I ran into one of the McLaren F1s they built when I was in Europe last month before last. It's actually the one that's owned by BMW in Munich, and it's threw some shots of it up on my Instagram and had one of those moments of, you know, meet your heroes. And Peter Stevens commented on the picture, and he said some nice things about my designs. He called them spectacular, which is nice. But his last comment said what he sees in those designs is forms that can be read and lines that go somewhere, the essence of good design. You know, to me, that is true of a beautiful yacht, a beautiful car, or somebody that understands the art, you know, the martial art that they have been sort of finding and refining, forms that can be read and that go somewhere. Yeah, I would read between the lines with intention and grace, you know. So it's there's a golden thread across all of this that I just love it.
There's a book that came out, I want to say in the 70s. It came out, there were a couple different titles, but one of them was Key in Everyday Life by Koichi Tohei. And in that book, one of the things that he talks about, he is an Aikido practitioner, which is not my background, but I mean, he was a fascinating character. And in that book, he talks about looking at like Japanese shodo, which is calligraphy, under a microscope, and how and who knows, like, you know, the validity of this or not, but it seemed accurate to me that the beginner, their calligraphy was different than the master's calligraphy. Like the master's calligraphy under the microscope, the molecules were lined up in a particular way that you didn't see in the beginner's calligraphy. So to me, that's that connection, like all the way down, like you said, to the microscopic level, to the molecules. Like there's something about that. And you know, it's maybe not necessary to say like, oh, it's some magical chi thing, but it's that there's something that goes all the way down to that minuscule scale, from the repetition and the experience and the know-how that's visible at our visual vantage point all the way down, and you know, zooming out.
And the infinite nature of that can feel overwhelming or intimidating, but it also is part of why this stuff doesn't get old. It can stay new, it can stay fresh, it can, you know, that refinement and that exploration and that, you know, the finding the new aspects of the palette, of the taste that you thought you knew, but you realize that there's you come around a corner and you're like, whoa, there's a whole other thing over here. That sort of macro and micro in both directions is part of the beauty. I know, even though, you know, just like a writer can have writer's block, I can have designer's block, but I also know that I don't need to worry about that too much, because I've seen the infinitude of how much is possible out there. And, if I hit a wall one day, I know it's just a wall. The object permanence of the possibility out there, and beauty and experience and relationship and so on. Even though I might have hit a wall, I know what's on the other side of that wall. And just maintaining that consciousness is not only crucial, but it's fun and great, and builds new capacities every day.
There's something called the Pauli effect, and I will briefly explain it for the listeners. Wolfgang Pauli was a theoretical physicist in sometime in the early half of the last century, or middle of the last century.
And I
And
know
yeah, and he's I believe he's somebody who's responsible for like quantum physics theory. And there was something named after him called the Pauli effect, and because whenever he would go into the laboratory, the machines would stop working. And it was such a well documented phenomenon that he had colleagues that wouldn't allow him to come into their labs because the machines would break in a way that they hadn't broke before. And I know about this because there's a book of letters between Pauli and Jung, and it's pretty deep stuff and it's very interesting. But there's stuff where Pauli writes about, I'm sitting in a cafe looking out the window and a car spontaneously bursts into flames, and it goes kind of like Brian's calligraphy. It's possibly an apocryphal story. I don't know the validity of Mr. Pauli. I don't know a whole lot of the details about it, but in a equally unverifiable anecdote, I had a friend growing up, and his dad would tell us lots of stories growing up in the rural South, and he would talk about his dad, and he said that his dad one night looked out of the window of his house and said, "Somebody in that house across the field is going to die because I see an orb going through the yard." And he told a lot of stories like that. But one thing he said is that his dad couldn't wear a pocket watch because when you put a pocket watch on, the watch would stop every single time. And I'll just for entertainment, I'll tell another little story about that. He said his dad sold life insurance, and one
Mm.
day he's riding through the country and he sees a bricklayer working on a house, and the bricklayer's building a chimney. And so he goes over and says, "Hey, you should get," he holler, pulls over and shouts up to him. He's like, "You should get life insurance because you could fall off that chimney and break your neck." And the guy's like, "Okay." So he signs up for a policy. Next day, falls off the same roof, breaks his neck. And so this guy's dad has his whole life was these like weird stories like that. And when you tell stories like that, our human nature is to be like, okay, well, show me the empirical
Yeah,
data,
the empirical component. Yeah.
the statistical, show me the numbers, prove that that's real. And I know from my life experience, so much weird shit has happened to me that I like to say I believe everything and I believe nothing as
Right.
as a result of that. But I do really believe that we've got some kind of relationship with the material world. There is some connection between the conscious and the unconscious, and we're interacting with it and shaping it, whether we're controlling it or there's something beyond a
Is it
randomized connection.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Um,
it's deterministic or other. And but regardless, when anybody who's who truly dedicates themselves to study the interaction of humanity with the outside world comes away with an awareness that there are a lot of pieces of this puzzle that we don't understand yet, can't measure, um, or otherwise is beyond us in some way. And that, fear of the unknown is one of the most powerful fears on earth. And so it's understandable that there would be a massive amount of pushback to anything like those apocryphal stories, or even some of the discussions of faith and beyond. But regardless of where you land on that, know that the brightest lights of history have looked very hard at lots of things, and come away saying there's more here. And I believe that in some way, working in the space of creativity and beauty, I get to bump up against that, and an honor and a pleasure that I wouldn't give up for almost anything. I I I believe that humanity has um, a deep need to have true beauty of some stripe in their quote unquote diet on a regular basis. In order to maintain a healthy existence. And we shit on it and call it things like sex sells and stuff like that. Well, yeah, maybe so, but there's something deeper there that we need deep down that all of these things can speak to and connect with, and you can sort of couple up to. And unless you open up to that in some capacity, your diet will be you'll be starving for beauty a little bit if unless you sort of open up to that in a conscious, intentional way.
Well, the thing is that people are right to fear the unknown because that's where
Right.
every single danger is. The thing
Yeah.
that's going to wipe you out is out in the unknown right now, coalescing. It is, and it's 100% true. But the problem is that it's the purpose of your life to shine light into the unknown. It truly is for all of us, regardless of what form that takes, because with that light of consciousness that you shine into the unknown, it is going to uncover terrors, but it's also going to uncover beauties.
Yeah. Yeah.
And life is comprised of both of those. And
Yeah.
you stunt your spirit by not looking. You have to take both of them and let them shape you. And in the early part of our conversation, talking about by the time the people are in high school, no hands go up for the artists, and
Right.
that's because they have learned that there is a structure in which they may achieve limited success but face limited risk. And they can more or less phone it in within that
Yeah.
structure and be very comfortable. But the fallacy of that is that it's a very shallow and unstable comfort because there's still chaos is still working and it's
Still
still
out
out
there.
there. And
Your
don't
denial doesn't care.
exactly.
It doesn't care about your denial.
Right, like right now in outer space, there is an asteroid that is turning in the light in a beautiful ballet. It's a poem. It's a inanimate poem floating through space, and we would just stare at it, and it would be so it's deep. You just stare and enjoy its beauty, and it's headed right towards our planet to wipe us out. It's like,
Yeah.
and live in spite of it. Live in
Yeah.
spite of it.
And I think, what you to respond in a moment about the terrors that are out there, I say get out there and look around regardless. It reminds me of a C.S. Lewis quote where he's talking about, if there's a wasp in the room, it's better to know where it is than to be, we would like to know where it is if there's a wasp in the room, and I guarantee there's a wasp in the room. So even the upside down side of things, having some awareness of the threats out there and the risks that we take every day, not with an undue obsession about it, but being aware of what those threats are to our thriving and to our creativity and to our balance, is a pleasant sort of bonus to getting out there and finding out what's possible. If you find out there's some really bad shit out there, I used to say, know where your stupid is. Like it's 9 o'clock. Do you know where your stupid is? Understanding your own vulnerabilities is something that kind of comes in partnership with getting out there and trying things and exploring and failing and succeeding and taking notes all the time. one of the biggest things I wish people would do more of is as they get out into, trying things and exploring all of these possibilities of professional creative space and beyond, take notes of what you experienced last year, what worked, what didn't. Don't just go, blindly into the coming year with no tools or notes of what worked or what didn't. Take the time to capture a little bit, what is working here, what is balanced, what is healthy, what is risky, what is, on the edge. That zoom out that we're invited to is not just so that you can breathe. That zoom out is so that you can build a more high fidelity big picture of the world that you inhabit, so take notes.
David, what do you consider to be your greatest success in life?
Gosh, I would say, it's, as I said, it doesn't matter whether you're flipping boats or flipping burgers, it's the people. And the biggest success I would say is the relationships, with friends, with family, with my siblings, my wife, my professional associates and colleagues, to be able to call them friends and co-conspirators in this adventure and in this journey. None of it really matters without that. And so maintaining as imperfectly and in a fucked up way as I do, being able to have a 40th birthday party that I had 2 years ago now.
I can't wait to have mine.
and and have a room just full of people that are there not just to celebrate me, but just to that we all inhabit the same world together, and it's just as much to celebrate them and and to thank them for the contribution to the fabric of my existence as much as it is to say anything about go David, so I've I'm very prolific as a designer, creative, sketcher, writer. I realized at one point in my life that I could do my whole life over again and just be completely immersed in music. So, I've got a lot of, just spewing out whatever creativity I can. But the thing that really, I, I moved to Europe at one point in order to um, take a job as a lead yacht designer with a firm over there. I didn't know anybody on the entire continent, and I was doing something I loved, but it was bizarre to not have any relationships to live in reference to or connection with in my day-to-day existence. And it was so bizarre. At one point I was living in Holland, so everybody in Holland, if you live in Holland, the only way to get around is on bicycles. So I was riding a bike to work one morning, and I literally had to sort of remind myself that I wasn't in some weird dream state. No, I live here now. I'm in Europe. I'm in this sleepy little village. It's raining. I'm on this bike going over the speed bump, and I'm going to my job to design yachts. The vacuum of not having those relationships had a bizarre effect on, like, I just realized how much those relationships are the linchpin of existence. And so leaning in with friends and family, I eventually built a community over there, but people is what it's all about.
Excellent answer. My next question for you is, what's the hardest thing you've ever done in your life?
Oh man, getting up every morning. I'm not a morning person. I say all that I've said about loving life and taking it by the horns, but it's it's for whatever reason, God made me so that this is when I wake up in the morning, this is the wrong planet. I do not want to be here. And sort of overcoming that every day of my life, I expect will be something that I will do from here to my last breath, my last day. So there's a lot of hard things, but cumulatively, I think that one might take the cake.
Well, congratulations, you got up today. So,
Hey,
yeah,
and thing to you.
and we're grateful you got up because you came to talk to us, and we
It's an
got
honor.
some really incredible insight into, if I may flatter you a little bit, not flatter, if I compliment you a little bit, we got some insight into a really powerful creative mind. And I think that the value of your story is to show people that the the splendors are life of the splendors of life are modeled and many colored, and they come from all directions. And
Uh,
how you choose to combine them into your life is totally up to you, and how you choose to participate with them and apply them to make life more beautiful is up to you. But the only real charge is that you must choose to do it, and you must go full speed. And you've gone so full speed that you in your draft behind you, you're collecting all this stuff that comes along, and you're you make things that are very complex as a result. And I think that the lesson for people is that you if you want to do something important, you got to you got to appreciate what's important in life. So
must be present to win, to steal
abs
a quote from a friend of mine.
And you got to get out of bed.
yes.
You do. You do.
Um,
Exactly.
so David, how can people connect with you online if you want them to? If you don't, you can just make up something fake.
No, I'm obviously on Instagram. It's JDW Design on Instagram, and that's got a good little tribe, not quite as robust as your tribe is, but it's a good little tribe. And we have interesting conversations there. I see my Instagram as less about building followers and more about building interesting conversations like this one. And it's J David Weiss on LinkedIn. Um, and I have a website that's down right now, but hopefully in the next few weeks I'm going to be fixing that. But that I've got an issue with a certificate on the website that I'm trying to fix the back end right now, so that nerdiness is not serving me as well as I would like it to. But that will be designovacreative.com. That's DESIGNOVA.
Well, certainly by the time this airs, if you don't have your certificate problem
I'll
sorted out, you're
get
a
my shit
great
together.
failure. Uh,
Indeed. And
um, well, and also I would like to say that if there's anybody out there who has the resources and inclination to purchase one of David's yachts, that we are officially acting as his brokers. So please go through us
yes.
first.
Yeah,
And
we'll take our 10%.
yeah, I mean, we're 10, 15. It kind of depends on the boat. Just send us a DM.
Yep.
Um,
We'll take care of it together.
absolutely. David, thank you for your time, your insight, and we're just really grateful that you talked to us today.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's been an honor and a tremendous conversation. I've really enjoyed it myself as well.
Same here. And to everybody that's listened today, thank you for your time as well, and we'll talk to you next time.
Bye, everyone.